Saleh is back in San Francisco for the first time since 2020. Robert Saleh has returned to the San Francisco 49ers as reported by the team itself on Friday. Robert Saleh will be the San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator in 2025. We're breaking down everything that led to this, how it almost came not to be for the 49ers, what Robert Saleh brings back to this defense, what still needs to happen, and what role will Saleh take with the team. Obviously, we know he'll be defensive coordinator, but could there be a little bit more on the table for Saleh in 2025? Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave that 5-star review on the audio podcasting platforms, and pop your bottles, pop the champagne, start celebrating because Robert Saleh is back in San Francisco. It's a great day. There are so many ways this could have played out because on one day it's reported that Saleh is getting a second interview in Jacksonville. The next day, Liam Cohen is leaving Tampa Bay to become the Jaguars head coach. Then less than 24 hours, that's reversed. He's not going back to Tampa Bay, or excuse me, he is going back to Tampa Bay. He has spurned the Jaguars. Then 24 hours from then, he spurns the Buccaneers and is going back to Jacksonville in secret meetings. It was crazy. Saleh's canceling his flights. He's not going to Jacksonville. It was so much information. Back to back to back to back. I'm sitting, waiting by my phone, waiting by my laptop on Twitter, on social media, waiting for the next twist and turn to unfold to see what happens for the San Francisco 49ers in their defensive coordinator search. But they finally got their guy. Let's be honest here, though. While we are celebrating, we are certainly happy. Although it wasn't my first choice, San Francisco got their first choice. That's what matters here. And it sets the table for this, I don't want to say boom or bust kind of year, but it's like, look, you got the one guy you wanted, you better win. And I think it's also okay to say that because things worked out in your favor, you kind of got lucky because the Jacksonville Jaguars were, maybe still are, one of the more dysfunctional organizations in football. And for whatever reason, they realized Trent Baalke's a massive roadblock in our way to becoming a functional franchise in football. They fire him last second in what seems like to be when Saleh was going to get the job. They fired Baalke. He goes back to Liam Cohen, and the rest is history. They kind of got lucky. Like, I don't think that's wrong to say San Francisco got a little bit lucky, but I guess you can say their lackadaisical approach publicly in their DC search paid off, which, okay, cool. You got the guy you wanted. It sets the table for a boomer bust type of season for you in 2025. You got to win this year. And Saleh seems like he's kind of a one-year piece to have. Not exactly sure what his staff will be, but it's a big day because what Saleh's bringing back to San Francisco is a lot of great things. And again, albeit he wasn't my first choice, there was so much to like about getting Saleh back in San Francisco. He runs that 4-3 cover 3, although he's kind of shifting towards a cover 4 defense. He trusts his defensive backs. And I think for the first time, whether it's Steve Wilks and even DeMeco Ryans, albeit Ryans was a really good DC, obviously doing great things with the Texans, but really since Steve Wilks and Nick Sorensen, the Niners have not had an elite level defensive coach that has a resilient mentality, a resilient mindset, that went on to be a rather unsuccessful head coach with the Jets, but there's context as to why that happened and the way things went down. However, what's great is that Saleh brings something that Wilks and Sorensen didn't have, the ability to adjust when the offenses aren't doing their job. When your offense can only score 20 points a game, Saleh brings this mentality to the table. Okay, let's go out there and win the game for them. Let's be the reason why we're winning football games, not be a reason why we're in these games, which is kind of how Wilks and Sorensen, their defenses were, albeit Sorensen was really bad at this. Saleh brings this our offense doesn't have to score 26, 30 points a game to win anymore. They can score 20. And I trust my defense to hold the opponent to 18 to 16 points. That's a massive win to get back for San Francisco. I think it's not wrong of me to say for the first time, maybe in 2 years, that they have a DC that is capable of winning them football games by himself. Obviously, you got to score points, but look at what Saleh did in San Francisco 2017 through 2020, and even with the Jets. A lot of those teams, albeit scored points in San Francisco, their offenses in the New York weren't great, is how I'll put that. A lot of those teams were led by the defense, where it was like you had Jimmy Garoppolo here, you had some pieces on offense, you had Deebo, you had Kittle, but it's like the offense really wasn't the one leading the way. It was still good, it was still efficient, but it really wasn't the reason as to why San Francisco was winning football games. Now that you have Kittle, and it seems like Deebo Samuel, and hopefully a healthy Brandon Aiyuk, and you have Christian McCaffrey, and Brock Purdy's in place, and Trent Williams is here, your offense can now be a reason as to why you win. And your defense can also be a reason as to why you're winning football games. I think he brings back this mentality of like, look, we want to crush, we want to kill, if you will, the opposing offenses that are facing us on a week-to-week basis. He loves running stunts up front on the wide nine. It certainly pays to have the athletic defensive alignment on the interior. One issue or one position I think they'll target during the draft and free agency. Look out for that as the offseason progresses. To put it kind of in very simple terms, Saleh's defense is about creating chaos for the opposing offenses. They want to create chaos. If you want to run against them, it is about we are going to make sure that while you may get lanes to run, it's a heck of a hard time seeing them, and we're going to do everything possible to make you not be able to get to them. Now, sometimes you're playing teams like the Lions that have a phenomenal offensive line. Saleh, in this day and age, when opposing offenses are getting Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry and Tony Pollards and Bijan Robinson, maybe Ashton Genty this year, like you're seeing these kind of refocus on running the football heavily. Even the Chiefs with Pacheco and Kareem Hunt now, like you seeing all these really good teams run the football. One thing Saleh does extremely well is, again, creating that chaos, making opposing offenses, when they want to run the football, feel like they're going into a hurricane of like tossing, you're just throwing everything but the kitchen sink at them. Like you are making them feel your presence, like not know what's going on. It's just like they're in a whirlwind, like, okay, boom, they're lost for 2 yards, boom, caught for nothing of a gain. So that's really one thing I love about this move. And again, I want Dennis Allen. I wanted Matt Eberflus. Those are my 2 picks ahead of him of their DC search. But San Francisco, don't get twisted here. It's a really big deal Saleh's back in San Francisco. It's a really big deal that cannot be understated. There seems to kind of be this feeling of hope again. And maybe that's from the outside looking in, but I think more importantly on the inside. After a really down year, after losing a Super Bowl, then being 6-11 with injuries everywhere, you then get the guy you're targeting. This is kind of like, for the MLB, you get your Juan Soto, you get the one, elite tier free agent you're targeting. It can change the mentality on the inside. If you're a Giants fan, right, San Francisco Giants fan, Willie Adames comes in, Buster Posey comes in, everything's revitalized, you're feeling good, like, okay, this can be different. This is something we haven't had in the Giants case, an elite level shortstop, and Buster Posey, who is doing his magic at the top of the organization. Whereas in San Francisco, you get a DC that can actually be the reason why you win football games, brings the energy. That was one of the biggest things that Tim Kawakami said this brass was wanting to kind of find and bring in. Hence why Pete Carroll's name was touted out there. Hence why Jeff Ulbricht's name was out there for a little bit of time. Robert Saleh is the ultimate energizer of a defense like this that has kind of been trying to find its footing. They made it work with Steve Wilks. It went far enough, but just couldn't get them over the hump. in the Super Bowl. And then it completely lost its footing with Nick Sorensen. But now you finally have the Energizer Buddy. You're gonna see the flexing, the yelling, the screaming, and more importantly, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, however long this thing lasts, if it's a 1 year boom or bust kind of thing for this organization, you essentially have two head coaches leading your coordinator spots. Kyle Shanahan running the offense, and you had Robert Saleh running the defense. That's really important here. What Saleh learned in New York matters. What he gained, even from his time with the Green Bay Packers as a consultant in with Matt LaFleur, all of that helps in what he can bring to San Francisco. Now, I don't know how that impacts Niners versus Packers, but Saleh spent a year almost in Green Bay, gaining information, being in offensive meetings, like doing it outside of San Francisco and outside the Jets, which, again, I don't know how much you can glean from them, but, Saleh really is, he left for better things to become a head coach, and he's coming back with much more information, much more knowledge that he can now bring over into a DC role and kind of harness that into 1 year of magic, hopefully, for the Niners. And also, I think, one other thing that San Francisco has really struggled with the last couple, maybe more so this past year, with Sorensen as DC. They had a hard time, one, defending the run for sure, but also in this day and age with the Lions offense, or even now the Bears offense with Ben Johnson, you are seeing this kind of play action brought back to life. The Rams are a big part of this, as well as Stafford if he comes back next year with Sean McVay. These teams love to run play action. And the more you see this refocus of running backs, the more you're going to see play action. And again, if Saleh lasts 1 year or 2 years, however long he's here, Saleh's defense knows how to handcuff opposing offenses running play action. He really trusts his defensive backs. You got to have these coverage linebackers and these athletic defensive linemen. But what he's able to do as a defensive coordinator against play action is some of the best stuff you see in football. And I think with teams getting back to these heavy ground and pound running games, having Saleh back on this Niners defense, whether it is with Greenlaw or Funga back at all, or just who they currently have now, plus some free agents and draft picks, it's really important. Like the last couple of years, it's felt like that the players have been carrying the scheme, whereas now the scheme can, albeit not carry, can certainly be a bigger reason as to why they're winning. In previous years with Wilkes, and even more so with Sorensen, albeit personnel has changed from time to time over the years, you've seen the need for players to make plays. And the scheme has really been lifted up by players. And now with Saleh back, it's going to be players lifting up that scheme for sure still, because players that are great are going to do that no matter what. But also now you're seeing the scheme lift up those players as well and be the reason as to why they're winning football games and a reason as to why they can make plays again compared to previous years where you're just like, what are we doing on third down? I don't know what's going on here. And you're kind of banking on your big name players to make plays because the scheme is not putting them in positions to succeed. Whereas Saleh's scheme and what he does and the play calls he does and how he attacks the running game and play action on third downs and early down sets really sets the personnel up to succeed on the Niners defense. That said, they still have needs. Like Saleh is a great first step into fixing this defense. It is a monumental first step into getting back to playing a San Francisco 49ers, brand of defensive football. I still think they have to improve their personnel. They really got to figure out what they're doing on the interior defensive line. I know Javon Hargrave is basically gone. He might come back on a cheaper contract. We'll see if that's the case, although I don't think that's going to happen. But they got to figure out what's happening on the interior. They have to figure out who is going to be the space-eating, pass rushing monster next to Bosa and Floyd. You like Malik Collins, you like Jordan Elliott, you like Yetur Gross-Matos. You have hopes for Khalil Davis. There are some pieces in place that you like, but those aren't number one guys. In fact, maybe to a certain extent, even Malik Collins, who is this team's right now best defensive tackle, isn't even a number two. You got to find 1 to 2 guys you can buy into. Go back to what it was like in 2019, albeit was so long ago. Look at who they have in place. DeForest Buckner. It was Eric Armstead. It was DJ Jones. Like, there was 3 guys in the middle that can eat space, that can attack, that can stop the run, but also get to the quarterback. And I get, even though Saleh's defense, lost Buckner via trade that next offseason, what was that first-round pick? It was Javon Kinlaw. Like, they are going to, I think, attack getting multiple, not just one, but multiple interior defensive linemen to help build up that pressure and attack opposing quarterbacks, because you have to. That's what Saleh's defense does. Go back to his time with the Jets. Almost every first round, it was defense, defense, defense. And outside of Zach Wilson's pick, it was edge rushers, defensive tackles. It was every single year they would leave the draft with like 13 edge rushers on their roster. And you're like, how do you find room for these guys? And they did. So I think that you are going to see, although it's kind of obvious they have to because of their roster personnel currently and the way it's constructed, you're going to see, like opposing offenses are getting back to running the football more, you're going to see this defense with Saleh at the helm get back to that trench warfare style of football they played, and also drag that into free agency and their draft focuses. I think another possible route they have to take in regards to what they need is edge rushers. Obviously, you love Nick Bosa, Defensive Player of the Year a couple of years back. You have Yetur Gross-Matos. You have Leonard Floyd. You certainly like those pieces, but Floyd was really inconsistent last year. Now, was that because of what was happening on the interior? Maybe. We didn't really get to see what this defense looked like with Hargrave in the middle. So maybe you can give this edge rushing group a kind of, I guess you can say, kind of a wash year, if you will. However, whether it's Max Crosby or finding multiple edge rushers to help facilitate this room, they want to rotate these guys. The Jets love to rotate these guys. They were, again, always finding more pieces. Even last year, they went out there and traded for Hassan Reddick. Now, there was some tumultuous contract things that held him back from reaching his full potential on the Jets, and the team was pretty bad last year. Then Saleh gets fired. So, they're going to go out there and they're going to find pieces. Now, Drake Jackson should be back for his 4th and final year of his rookie contract. Hope he can be something. But just like I said earlier, that them kind of attacking the interior defensive line, they got to find another edge rusher, if not 2 or 3, because they are so weak at that position. Robert Beal was getting like key rotational snaps, and young player out of Georgia. I get you want to see what he can do, and he can certainly help you in areas, but it's like he's like a 5th or 6th guy. He is a number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. They have to find like a bona fide starter that can help rotate in there opposite Bosa. Obviously, you can go to the draft. Everybody wants Abdul Carter. He's not going to be there come 12 or 11, unfortunately, for San Francisco in the first round. Then your mind shifts to free agency. Who can you target? Who's on the trade market? Whatever they do, you are going to see them attack defensively. And if you want to use that swarm kind of motto DeMeco Ryans coined in San Francisco, you're going to see San Francisco get back to that swarming mentality on defense with Saleh. And I think you're going to see them use that cap money they have, like $50, $55 million. They can extend Kittle. They can extend Warner. They can do other things to maneuver the cap. They'll extend Brock Purdy for sure. They can redo deals on their books currently. You're going to see them, I think, maybe not pay heavy, but make sure they are making defensive line a focus with Saleh. They also have to decide what they're doing with Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. Robert Saleh's scheme, while it doesn't have to be Dre Greenlaw, they got to find another linebacker that can cover like Dre Greenlaw can. Obviously, we love Greenlaw here. that's a tricky situation. I think he wants to be back. I think ultimately he will be back. I think it just comes down to how's the Achilles, how is the calf, and how much money does he want. If he wants 10, 12, $15 million per year, it's a no-go. The franchise tag is way too high per year. It's not worth it. Now, you can utilize that, and you can certainly redo contracts after the fact of via cap hits and get an extension off of that to keep him here, but it just complicates things to a point you don't really want to go to. That said, whether it is Dre Greenlaw or it's somebody else, they got to find that coverage linebacker. I think it'll be through the draft. However, one name out there that may want to come to San Francisco is Eric Kendricks, who burned to San Francisco last year. He was going to sign here. Then Mike Zimmer is in with the Dallas Cowboys. Then he goes to Dallas instead, leading to Devondre Campbell coming to San Francisco in his shoes. Now Mike Zimmer is done in Dallas. Could Eric Kendricks come to San Francisco and be the kind of third linebacker in this group with D. Winters? Or can even Saleh kind of unlock more of D. Winters to kind of be the young linebacker next to Fred Warner? Either way, they got to find an answer there and figure out what they're doing at linebacker next to Fred Warner. Because Saleh needs coverage linebackers on his defense. Then Talanoa Hufanga. I am of the belief that he will not return next year. I think they want to see what Mustafa as a starter can be. Obviously, there was so many bright spots last year for sure. They want to they got to figure out and decide, is Jair Brown the future, or do they want to pair whether it's Mustafa or Brown with this kind of roaming free safety? I think when you go back to what Saleh had in San Francisco, his safeties weren't great. Don't forget, he was not there when they drafted Hufanga. That was a DeMeco Ryans regime pick, right? That was his tenure as DC in San Francisco that picked him. He had Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt as his guys. So I think Saleh, you may see this desire to have a roaming kind of good run defending, but also like guy that doesn't necessarily need to play in the box, where his strengths sure can help you in the box, but that's not his role. I think Mustafa can do a little bit of that more than Hufanga and Jair Brown can, but I think with what Saleh wants, he doesn't mind that thumper. In fact, he wants that thumper, Mustafa, Jair Brown, but he wants that coverage player that can, cover the deep ball. One thing Jimmy Ward was phenomenal at was coverage. I think a lot of the defenses in recent years has kind of gone to this playmaking ability on the back end. And that's great. You certainly want to have that in your group. Getting takeaways and turnovers is so important for any defense in football. However, one of the most valuable things that Jimmy Ward brought to this defense, especially in 2019, was his coverage skills. He wasn't a big interception guy. He wasn't getting takeaways, and that was a big knock for him on his game. But what he was doing was limiting big plays, playing lockdown coverage at safety, at nickel, being versatile. I really wouldn't be shocked if they draft a cornerback with the idea of, look, you're a coverage player, and then take him and transition him into a safety. That's the same thing Ward did when he was picked in the first round back in 2015, whatever it was. I can see that being the case. They have to have a coverage, or at least with Saleh's defense, have shown the desire to have a coverage-first safety. Then you give and you mix in Mustafa and Jair Brown and maybe Hufanga's back, albeit I don't see it that way. Then you have your playmakers. You want that, right? One thing Tartt was really not good at was getting interceptions. If you have that coverage guy and you have that playmaker on defense, you can mix and match, and it kind of gives you the best of both worlds and what you want defensively. And I think we're going to see that from Saleh. I think, this is a great first step, but there's so much work to be done. Hence why we were all getting impatient of every day that goes by, you are ruining your chances of getting him, whether it's the Saints or the Cowboys or the Jaguars. We are or even the Raiders, we're inching towards not getting a deal done, and you are going to be left in the dust there was a report by Matt Mayoko saying, like, San Francisco was panicking too. Their second, third, and fourth choices were already hired and gone. It was really Saleh or bust. And thankfully, they got Saleh, and it's a phenomenal first step, but there's so much more work to be done. But I'll tell you this, this kind of bleeds into the next point I have here of, like, the role he'll have in San Francisco is, yes, defensive coordinator, leader of the defense. According to Mayoko, he'll have this kind of head coach style role of the defense. But what it does is bringing him back in here when it comes to personnel and how it almost kind of calms everything down. The last couple of years, despite how great they've been, whether it's been 2023 and going to the playoffs and Super Bowl, it's felt very chaotic at times. Like, yeah, they're winning football games, and winning certainly fixes everything for so many franchises. You win, 13 games a year, you can look past a lot of your problems. Hence, Philadelphia, who's usually competitive the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, they're very chaotic, but they win a lot of games. Hence why you don't see much turmoil happening out there in regards to front office or head coaching or coordinator things. Whereas in San Francisco, you've had 2 defensive coordinators fired in back-to-back years, and you're reverting back to one of the guys that was here, over half a decade ago. And while that's great in itself, it's been very chaotic despite the winning they've had the past couple of years. And look, I think what Saleh brings to this is that he calms everything down. He kind of, he's almost kind of like, he really is the kind of the yin to the yang of Kyle Shanahan, where you have Shanahan, who has been kind of hands over everything because there's been so much chaos. He's kind of been very spread thin, whether it's special teams or defense. He's been in all these meetings, talking to all these coordinators, kind of, again, had himself so spread thin where you've seen the offense kind of suffer, especially this year, where he couldn't trust Brian Schneider. He couldn't trust Nick Sorensen. And he's like, I don't know what to do. I think getting Saleh back in the building allows the Niners to simplify everything. It makes everyone's life easier, especially Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan no longer has to kind of helicopter head coach his coordinators and monitor them and talk to them constantly. Of course, they're all tight-knit. Of course, they're talking, but it's not like I have to be in meetings like coaching up the groups with you. I'm not the special teams coordinator. I'm not the DC. I'm the head coach and the OC. And he doesn't mind overseeing those things, but he's been like heavily involved in those meetings and whatnot. So I think to finally get somebody in the building that has credibility, that has the prestige of Robert Saleh, like when Nick Sorensen walked into, and I was there the first time it happened, when he walked in the room, you were just like, this is the guy? Like, Steve Wilkes, for all of his downfalls, when he walked into the room, he commanded your respect. Like, he was a presence. Now, he was an older coach. He had his gray hair. He had this, as Demo Lenore quoted him as, this professor kind of feel to him of like, look, I'm going to teach you. But he also commanded the podium. And I think that for Sorensen, it was like, he wasn't supposed to be there, and it showed in the way he talked to the media, the answers he had. When Saleh walks in that room, yes, he's built like a linebacker, and he's jacked, and you're like, oh my God, he's massive. But the way he talks, the way he commands the room, the way he almost demands respect, even from somebody like Kyle Shanahan, to a point of he can push back on Kyle in meetings now and say, you know what? I know you have this like genius level of respect, around the NFL, and you're this great offensive play caller, but I was a head coach for 4 years in New York, and my defense was still phenomenal when I was there. I've been to a Super Bowl with you, and you've seen what I can do, and I think, that lends to making the coaches stronger. It lends to making the team stronger, where the last couple of years there really wasn't this pushback. even for a coach like Steve Wilks, you know, Shanahan ran that show, right? He was calling timeouts on third downs in the Super Bowl. He was, in a way, threatening Steve Wilks' job after the Vikings game where they gave up that halftime touchdown and lost that game kind of middle of the year during their 3-game losing stretch in 2023. Shanahan ran that show, as he should. He's the head coach, but with Saleh, while it certainly makes Shanahan feel more comfortable, he's not going to be running those defensive meetings. He isn't running the show. This is, I'm the DC, you're the OC. We'll collaborate. You're the head coach, but like, you don't have to worry about what my unit is doing. Like, we're going to be good. We're going to be fine. And that is such, like, it's like being a parent or being married when your husband or wife willingly takes something off of your plate of like, oh, thank God, I had so many things to do today. And you going and getting the groceries makes it so much easier for me. Like, it's something along those lines where it's like, oh, thank God. Like, I've been so spread thin, I can now get back to just doing the offense where and Saleh can just be on defense, and it's going to make everything so much better. Like this team, from at least a coaching standpoint, should be so much more well run. You're not going to hear these stories of Shanahan and Wilks are fighting behind the scenes and Sorensen's job is in question. Like, Saleh is just like calm, cool, collected. He's out there screaming with the guys. He'll be the leader. Emotionally, X's and O's wise, they need, where Shanahan can just be this offensive genius he wants to be as an OC and not worry about what's happening with his coordinators on the other side of the football. The other great part of this is that Saleh, with this pedigree, is going to have so much more input on drafting. And while ultimately Shanahan and Lynch, mainly Kyle, get the final say of things and players they draft, I think this is like, hey, look, we have to bring in the expert to kind of steer this ship back on the right direction. And I think, Kyle's great at that. And on the offensive side, they'll certainly figure things out. The offensive line, the receivers, the running backs, quarterback stuff, tight ends and stuff. But on defense, it is like, all right, Robert, who do you want? Who do you like here? And I think maybe in previous years, it was like a 75-25, 80-20, maybe even 85-15 of like Kyle and Wilks and Sorensen. Like, I wouldn't be shocked to know that Nick Sorensen had like zero input on who this team drafted last year. Would not be shocked to learn that. Whereas Saleh, it's like not exactly 50-50, but it's certainly closer to that than it has been the last couple of years or so with Wilks and Nick Sorensen. He just brings so much more to the table than the last two guys it brought. He's a legitimate defensive coordinator that will bring it every day. Like, he is locked in every day, and he's going to ask his players to do things he would also do. He's not going to say, hey, Fred, hey, Bosa, hey, Mustafa, hey, Greenlaw, I want you to do this. They're not going to be pushback. It's like, nope, because I would do the exact same thing in the front office, dealing with John and Kyle and scouts and each player. You're going to get 110% every single day, and you're going to have a coach now that has earned it, that's proven it at the biggest levels, and wasn't carried to get there. In fact, was arguably, I don't want to say carrying the offense, but was a much bigger factor into how and why they were succeeding. When you go back to their stats, with Saleh as the DC, and it is staggering how different the last 2 years have been compared to those years. And you compare the last 2 years to the Jets. This is an attacking defense that wants to get after the quarterback, that wants to get sacks, get takeaways, get turnovers, stop the run, stop play actions, overall kind of suffocate opposing offenses. And I know last year was a kind of a down year for San Francisco, but, a lot of the talk in the playoffs has been they're not that far off. With Saleh back defensively, that speeds up that progression and progress back to being a top dog in the NFC. And if Stafford retires with the Rams, I mean, you're talking NFC West, champions again. At least on paper, that's kind of the projection I'm giving of like this is a total course correction back to what needed to be done to fix this team's problems in 2025. That said, there are some players that Saleh could bring over that I think need to be talked about. The first ones are obviously ex-Niners, Javon Kinlaw and Solomon Thomas. I know there always is a theme of familiarity with Kyle Shanahan, whether it's coaching staff or players. He likes to bring in guys he used to coach. And Saleh is similar in that. He knows, like, he signed Thomas. He signed Kinlaw after their 10 years with San Francisco were over. He brought in DJ Reed, who kind of found more success with the Seahawks after he was waived by the Niners a couple of years back. He brought those guys in knowing what they could become, albeit I don't see San Francisco signing Javon Kinlaw. I don't really want them to sign Solomon Thomas. I think, yes, this team needs depth. And depending on the price, you don't mind that. And they are certainly better players now than what they were when they were in San Francisco, both Bosa first-round draft picks. They kind of refined their career, if you will, kind of retooled themselves into being these, like, I guess, durable, maybe not for Kinlaw, but more durable interior defensive line presences. Solomon Thomas can give you edge rushing depth if you need to on certain plays. So there is some validity to bringing them both back in. However, I think San Francisco needs like legitimate durable stars. They have a lot of depth on the interior when it comes to if you can push down Collins and you can push down, Khalil Davis and Kalia Davis and Evan. Like, they have some pieces in place you don't mind having. Jordan Elliott as depth. The issue is last year, their depth guys became starting guys. So I think if they can find starting caliber interior defensive linemen, it'll go a long way to kind of, I guess you can say, like, reestablishing that depth they had or didn't have last year that they had under Saleh and DeMeco Ryans during the late 20-teens and early 2020s, if you will. Then there's DJ Jones, who I have kind of been talking about for a little bit of time. DJ Jones tweeted out after Saleh was brought back, kind of indicating like, hey, good for you. Like, don't forget about me. And Jones is a free agent this year. And I think there was some rumors that they had kind of internally talked about acquiring him at the trade deadline. Nothing happened. However, I would not be shocked. Like, if there's a name that was in San Francisco before under Saleh that I think could be brought back and, in fact, should be brought back, I think it's DJ Jones. I think he makes the most sense. I think that he is that run defending, and he's grown into a much better pass rusher in previous years with Denver, interior defensive tackle. I think he would be an instant starter. And if they want to draft that, D-tackle in the first round of 11 or get a younger guy in there in the second round or third rounds, you pair him with DJ Jones and you mix in Malik Collins and Elliott and Evan Anderson and Khalil Davis and Kalia Davis, you have this like 6 to 8 group of guys you love to have. Now, you certainly have your depth, but you also have 2 guys at the top. You're like, we love these dudes. These are our starters. And you see what the Eagles have done this year with Jalen Carter and company and Jordan Davis. Those guys eat in the middle. And I'll say this, like, and it's a very common phrase in the NFL, the fastest way to the quarterback is through the center. The Niners recently have not been able to find a lane to get to the quarterback the fastest. And I think they wanted to have Hargrave be that. And although he was a Pro Bowler in 2023, really didn't live up to his potential, got hurt this year. I would love to bring him back. I don't think it'll happen. However, they got to find some space eating D tackles. Jones can do that for you to pair with these pass rushing, hopefully guys you can bring in to help get to the quarterback as fast as possible. The other guys, DJ Reed again, who is, I know there's been some like, well, he could make sense in San Francisco according to Bleacher Report and PFN and PFF, and Yeah, he could, but I think the price tag might be a little too high, and I'm not sure if they want two corners around 5'9", 5'10", or even shorter than that with Lenore. I think they want to have somebody else kind of like Renardo Green in regards to being 5'11" and maybe 6 foot, guys that can go against these like elite level tier cornerbacks. And Lenore is so good. Like his size doesn't dictate how good he is, but having a bigger body defensive back can give you a lot. And DJ Reed's been really good with the Jets and the Seahawks the last couple of years, but price tag matters when you want to add other pieces. And I think that the draft could be a better place to be, or um, even like a veteran free agent makes more sense to me than paying 10 plus, 14 plus $1 million for a cornerback because you're already paying Lenore that. And then what was the point of drafting Green? I think that's not the route they'll take. Then there's Ashton Davis, safety from California, who was with the Jets the last couple of years. If you go back to last offseason, I was all over Ashton Davis. I thought he made a ton of sense. The coverage safety started with the Jets, special teams player. He's an all-around kind of strong. He's not really amazing at anything. He's kind of good at everything, or at least average at everything. He's not going to crush you. He's not going to kill you. But he brings this ability to kind of roam around. He isn't the fastest guy. He isn't the best in coverage, but he lifts the floor of that group, which is going to see Hufanga likely leave. Gibson will be gone. He'll probably retire again. Then you're left with Jaya Brown, Mustafa, and George Odom. And even George Odom is kind of progressing the last couple of years. So I would love that move. Of those 5 guys I mentioned, Davis and Jones make the most sense to me. But, that to me isn't the most important part of who does Saleh bring over roster-wise. My bigger concern is, what does the coaching staff look like? Will he bring any more of a staff over from the Jets? They're redoing things out there. Woody Johnson, they got Aaron Glenn in the building. Who of the fired coaches and coordinators do they kind of replace and bring over? Maybe Joe Woods comes back and is a valuable part of this defense. Nick Sorensen's been fired, or at least that's kind of the assumption. Or maybe he didn't accept the demotion. They were going to keep him on staff, and he was maybe going to be special teams coordinator. Then he's not now. So there's confusion there. Brandon Staley has yet to be let go, at least officially, but he's not supposed to come back either, which I know that's a big rejoicing or a big reason to celebrate further for fans out there who didn't like either one of those guys. But I just do wonder, because Staley was so involved in the nickelback coaching, which think what you want of him as a DC and a head coach, the nickelbacks weren't a problem last year. The defensive backs really weren't a problem last year outside of Isaac Yiadom and Jaya Brown, but Yiadom is fine. He's a fine piece. He was the worst of the 3 or 4 guys there, and Brown had a sophomore slump. It happens. So, it'll be interesting to see what they do with Staley if he's back. But if he's not back, who do they get to replace him? Joe Woods makes some sense on this defense, but also special teams. It was really interesting to hear when these reports are kind of pouring out on social media of this guy and that guy interviewing here or there. The minute Saleh's name was, truly connected to San Francisco of this is happening, you all of a sudden heard Sorensen's gone, Staley's gone, because they then interviewed Brant Boyer, Jets special teams coordinator. And if you're not sure who that is, that's a really good thing, because you don't really want to hear about your special teams coordinator. And I think for Brant Boyer, he's been with the Jets since 2016. And usually when teams fire head coaches, fire GMs, DCs, OCs, they just wipe the slate clean all the time, bring in their own coordinators. Boyer survived 3 different regimes in New York. That to me is impressive. He's had top 10 units almost every single year. This past year is a little different for them, a lot of chaos. However, when they had Saleh brand new and they had Jeff Ulbrich, like they had their guys in place on the defense, Brant Boyer's unit was one of the best in football. And I think when you look at who San Francisco has been talking to, Chris Tabor, Chris Banjo, Chet Modkins, Brant Boyer, you can see there is this like clear, I guess you can say, like they're focusing on guys that have had like top 10 units the past couple of years. And Brian Schneider, for as good as he was in Seattle, really wasn't that. It was more of a, hey, you coach special teams. You were in Seattle. So was that guy. And so was this guy. Bring him in too. And once Pete Carroll left, there really wasn't much to do. And even John Fassel, like when he left as well with the Rams and everything, like in the Dallas Cowboys, like the top tier guys are diminishing. And Brant Boyer is maybe one of the best guys out there. And the reason why I bring this up is because defense and special teams are very much tied hand in hand. Like their personnel meetings, similar groupings, it's a lot of the same guys. And I think Boyer preaches the same mentality that Saleh does. We're going to smack guys in the mouth. We're going to be in our gaps. We're not leaving on punts before the ball is kicked. If you're blocking the punter, it's about being this like hyper-focused, well-knowledged, if you will, unit. And I think Boyer brings that. I think him and Saleh kind of share that same defensive mindset of like, look, if we are well coached, that almost supersedes bad personnel. And I think Boyer, unlike Sorensen this past year, unlike Schneider the last couple of years, like they couldn't survive that. Saleh has very much, and Brant Boyer has very much been able to have really good defenses despite bad personnel. And so I think that's kind of what San Francisco is like. How can you survive when you're down 2 linebackers, you're missing 2 safeties, your top cornerback's hurt, and your entire defensive line's depleted? Although that's going to be hard to do, getting Saleh and in return having Brant Boyer be in the same room with him as your special teams coordinator with the same mindset, same mentality, it lifts up and increases the strength and hope and ability of your unit. So we will see what San Francisco does with the rest of their coaching staff. A lot of decisions to be made, but we're almost towards draft season. I'm sure they'll hire a special teams coordinator soon, but getting Saleh in that building now, so important. They can finish their staff and then turn their entire focus into the free agency period in the draft. Free agency is like in 2 months. The draft is in 3 months. We're almost there. We are currently, the Shrine Bowl's happening. Senior Bowl's in like 2 weeks. Like it is fast approaching. With all of that said, tell me down below what you think of the Robert Saleh signing. What does it bring to the table? How excited are you for this? Do you think it was a mistake? Are you for it? Which players do you think he'll bring in as he comes back to San Francisco for the first time since 2020? And what coaches do you think he should bring with him over from the New York Jets? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Draft content is coming quickly on the channel. I'm currently going through all the quarterbacks. Then I'll hit the running backs, tight ends, receivers, offensive linemen. Then I'll get to the defense. Stay patient. It's coming. Slowly but surely, draft content will be here on the channel, so stay tuned. We'll get into free agency very soon as well, but be patient. We're almost there. But live in the moment currently. What do you think of Robert Saleh being brought back to the Bay? You can tell me on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. If you want to go to a concert, sporting event this year, use our promo code 49ersaccess, 49 ERS ACCESS at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off your first purchase. You can also go to SportsSpyder.com for all your favorite teams' latest news, podcasts, and articles. And you can check out my work on theheavy.com covering the Niners and the Packers. It's great stuff there. We're covering everything. Again, draft is here. It's a ton of draft content on there. You don't want to miss out on theheavy.com. That's all I have for you today. Again, tell me down below, what do you think of the Robert Saleh signing? I want to know what you have to say. Put it down in the comments below. And what do you think this team should do in this upcoming season? My name is Sterling Bennett. And until next time, as always, stay faithful.